Welcome to Lessons I Learned in Law, the weekly podcast by Heriot Brown In-House Legal Recruitment. I'm Scott Brown and I'm a recovering lawyer and founder of Heriot Brown. And each week I'll be bringing you conversations with leading legal minds who've found fulfilling paths in their careers. We dive into their unique stories and the lessons that they've learned, discovering how each guest defines success in their own way. Whether it's navigating big risks or sharing pivotal moments and career successes and how they got to the place they are in their career. Our guests offer insights and experiences that you won't really find elsewhere. It's an open conversation, so tune in each week for fresh perspectives and real chats that highlight the diverse paths to a rewarding career in law. On this week's episode of Lessons I Learned in Law, I was joined by Daniel Winterfeldt. Now, if you don't know Daniel, then definitely give him a follow on LinkedIn and connect with him, as he says at the end of the episode. But Daniel is General Counsel for EMEA and Asia at Jefferies Bank, which is a global investment bank. He also held positions prior to joining Jefferies as a partner in some leading law firms in London and international law firms. Amazing experience as a capital markets expert by trade, but now in a broad general role managing a team. He's also founder of the Interlaw Diversity Forum, which he set up 17 years ago, not long after he moved to London and faced challenges as a gay man who was out in a profession where that wasn't the norm at that point in time, and certainly was a difficult environment for him. So we found out motivations for setting up that forum, some of the key landmarks and successes that it's had and continues to have, and we talk about its recently published inclusive hiring toolkit, which I think everyone in the profession should take a read through and apply in their processes when it comes to hiring in the profession. So some amazing things, and I hope you enjoy. So without further ado, hi Daniel, welcome to Lessons I Learned in Law.
Great, thanks. Great to be here. Thanks for inviting me to have a chat.
No, thanks for joining me. I think I've badgered you a couple of times over the last year or 18 months, so it's great to sit down and chat, and we'll come on to the sort of the timing of it, which coincides with some exciting stuff that you've been doing over the last year. So keen to hear a bit more about that. But for those uninitiated, it would be great if you could give an overview or a bird's eye view of your position and what you do.
Great. So I'm a lawyer, shocking surprise. I am currently the General Counsel for EMEA and Asia at Jefferies, which is a global investment bank. So I'm in charge of legal, regulatory, and compliance across Europe, Middle East, and Asia. I have an amazing team of people that I work with. And in my spare time, of which I don't have tons, I'm the founder and co-chair of the Interlaw Diversity Forum, which I founded almost 17 years ago now. 2008, in February 2008 was the first meeting. Works across diversity, inclusion, and culture in the legal sector.
Brilliant. Well, keen to chat more about that and find out a bit more about the role at Jefferies as well. But 17 years with Interlaw and having set up, what was the initial spark that made you take that step and set up the organization?
Yeah, well, I wouldn't say it was sort of I think there probably was a spark, but it was sort of a long build-up. I moved to London in 2000 from New York, and London and New York in 2000 were really different places. Mm-hmm. I felt like I was walking back in time. There's obviously a different makeup in London, a different history, but from sort of a perspective of like diversity and inclusion, it was really, really different. In Manhattan in the 90s, I went to law school at Fordham in Manhattan, and then worked for 2 years on Wall Street. A law firm called Hughes Hubbard and Reed, where I did exporter international corporate work. And I mean, there were gay people everywhere in Manhattan. People were out. They were partners in law firms, doctors, lawyers. And then I moved to London, and not only in the professional space was nobody out and there was no one there, but even in private, outside of work, people were not necessarily out. So if you went out and about and you went to like a gay bar, very rarely would you meet anyone who was a professional. People were quite not open. They were in the closet. And so they would maybe socialize in members clubs or in people's homes. But it was really, really different from New York, where people were so out and proud. And I mean, it's a bit of a cliche, but it was, it was like Sex and the City was a good capture of New York at that time. It was filmed for years, except that show would upset us because they would go and film at our favorite restaurants or shops, and then they would become swarmed by tourists. There anymore. So they're ruining another restaurant. You'd show up and you're like, oh, we're filming Sex and the City today. And we're like, no, you can't take away the Magnolia Bakery from us. There'd be lines around the block. But there was a big difference, and it was challenging. It was very challenging to be in an office of 250 people and be the only out person. And, obviously, again, the makeup is different, but there were a lot of racial ethnic minorities in New York in the 90s. You came here, and I think diversity here at the time was, well, we have someone who's Scottish and someone who's Welsh and someone who's Irish. And that was like their diversity. I also worked with people, for example, who were Jewish, who didn't tell me they were Jewish for 3 years. I mean, you're at Counsel, a Jewish law firm. In New York, you had the white shoe firms. That's like our magic circle. Well, they had a rule that Jewish people couldn't work there. So Jews had to go, historically, obviously not now, but the Jews had to go start their own firms. So you look at the firm like Counsel, you look at all the firms that have Jewish names because they were founded by people who had to go start their own law firm in order to work, and lawyers in New York. Mm-hmm. So there's obviously a long history there. So you're at Counsel, and people, and the head of the office, Mike Francis, who just recently retired, was openly Jewish as well. But my colleagues did not tell me for years.
Okay.
So, it was just really different coming to London. So as an openly gay man, I thought it was challenging. I could go through stories, but, people saying inappropriate things or doing inappropriate things. Mm-hmm. But also just being kind of othered and treating differently. So I did that as an associate. So I came over to London in 2000 as a third-year associate, mm-hmm. And worked at Counsel for almost 5 years. And then I moved to Jones Day, where I launched a U.S. securities practice. So while I did a mixture of cross-border M&A work and corporate work, a little bit of restructuring, and then moved, and they trained me on capital markets as well. So I worked up big private equity-backed IPOs, Yale, remember when there used to be phone books? United Biscuits. I did a high yield for United Biscuits. I worked on a Premier Foods IPO. So a lot of really big, high-profile deals. But again, as a gay person, it was isolating. Mike Francis was a great leader. He definitely took care of me and made sure that I had great work and great assignments. And my whole career is really owed to the high quality of work that I had. Was it while I went to Jones Day, where I worked, and I continued doing just capital markets there and launched a U.S. securities practice for them. But again, there were actually two of us who were out at Jones Day, so I wasn't completely alone. He wasn't there the whole time, but Sheldon Mills, who's now at the FCA, was one of my colleagues. Okay. There were two of us. I moved in 2008 to Simmons & Simmons. I became a partner, and I kind of took a breath and thought, let's do something about this. Because now that I have a partner, I made it, right?
Yeah.
And I thought, well, what can I do to help and support people? And I've been running for about 2 years a group called the Forum for U.S. Securities Lawyers in London. I saw you leap for a second there. It's a riveting organization, but, brought together people to talk about how U.S. securities impact the London market. So we brought together lawyers, bankers, the stock exchange, settlement systems, intermediaries to talk about U.S. securities rules. And I thought, well, we can get these people together around a table, because if you think about U.S. securities lawyers, they were like gay people back then, right? There's one here, one there at the firms. So by bringing them together, we're all more powerful and we're able to communicate. So I thought, well, let's apply this, technology to diversity, and let's start a group. And when I started my U.S. forum for lawyers, there were about 7 of us got together around a conference table at Jones Day and started that group. And, it's still running today, and we're planning, an upcoming event. So it's still around. Law is higher profile, but, Interlaw was a boom because in 2008, when we started, we sent out a PDF invitation. I knew hardly anyone who was out. And they sent around this invitation and invited people to come, and 120 people signed up and people showed up. And I'm sitting in this auditorium at Simmons and Simmons going, who are all you people? And where have you been the last 8 years? And the spark, I would say, that made that happen. So it was a slow build up, but the real spark was the lawyer did an article and they interviewed Tim Hales, who at the time was a senior lawyer at JP Morgan. And the headline said, JP Morgan tells law firms to shape up on gay issues with a giant picture of Tim. And that was the first time I'd ever seen anyone talk about sexual orientation in a professional context in the United Kingdom.
Right.
Because at the time, and why people were so private about it, is it was considered a private matter. So I think young people listen and think they won't understand that, but there was a prevalent attitude in the zeros and the tens here that sexual orientation was a private matter. It was something you shouldn't talk about in the workplace. So therefore it was inappropriate to tell people that you were gay. And at the time, I'd say like in 2008, it was sort of a 40 and up and 40 below. So there'd been a huge kind of generational shift on attitudes towards sexual orientation. Interlaw was made up all these young out people, but people generally believed it was private. So when I saw that article in 2007 at Jones Day, this client I worked with, a partner called Hillary Winter, was one of my biggest clients with JP Morgan. Not only did I get to see gay in big letters in the legal context and in work, but here was one of our largest clients saying, this really matters. And what Tim did is Tim invited the managing or senior partner from the top 10 billing firms to come to a half-day seminar with Stonewall, the leading LGBT plus charity here in the UK. So he said, hey, this is something that matters to us. Don't send your diversity person. Don't send your HR team. I want leadership coming because we're saying this is an important issue to us. We have a choice where we spend your money, and therefore, so that was a big catalyst. So Tim spoke at that launch event and became our first patron at Interlaw. And we had Ben Summerskill, who was the chief executive of Stonewall at the time, speak as well.
We'll move on to those. We'll move on to lesson one, and then we'll come back to talking more about the great work at Interlaw as well. But if you could share lesson one with us, Daniel, that'd be great.
Yeah. So my lesson one is people first always. I think particularly in the law. I mean, if you think about it, we don't manufacture light bulbs. We don't sell shoes. We're not, selling cars. We're selling ideas. So ideas come from people. So I think, the heart of all of our businesses, the heart of what we do, are people, much like your business is 100% people driven as well.
Yeah.
So it's important to always center everything you do on people and talent. In a law firm or an in-house legal team, if we don't have the best people who are performing at their best, we're not delivering the best then to our clients. So it's incredibly important that it's a business imperative to focus on people, to focus on not just their performance, but also their well-being and their experience within the organization. So I think that's something that gets lost sometimes. I think sometimes law firms get lost in billable hours, and people can have their endless debates about issues with the billable hour. But I think the biggest problem with it can be if you lose sight of the fact that someone A is paying those bills. It's not just how many hours can you rack up. It's what's the quality of those hours, what's the output from those hours. And at the end of the day, are clients happy with the work, and are they paying a fair portion of the law firm should be able to make money? That's fine. I don't have an issue. People make money in business, but I think it is important to have your kind of moral compass finely tuned. So I think putting people at the heart of any strategy or any business in law is just critical.
Yeah, I think it's critical for sustainability in the team and in the business. Well, having spent time in partnership in big law and law firms, and then now in house and having been in house for a number of years, do you see there being a difference? Is there a key difference there as to how important those skills are, or how important the people are, or is there a different approach or a mindset between the two?
So I think there definitely is a difference. I think part of it has to do with culture. I think that, law firms have very unique cultures. They're kind of strange structures. I mean, a partnership is a strange structure, but they're sort of partnerships with delegated authority. I mean, more and more now, management hold almost all the power. I mean, very few decisions are actually made by the partnership. There's delegated authority to management, and management make those decisions. And then the firm's quite at the mercy of how those people behave and what kind of culture they create. And there can be differences. And I think at a public company where most in-house teams are, you have shareholders to answer to, you have internal audit teams, you have systems and controls and procedures, you have much more developed corporate governance, right? You've got board of directors, you've got independent non-executive directors, the board has to answer to. There's a lot more checks and balances from a corporate governance perspective and a lot more accountability inside a corporation. And that then will impact the legal team. But I also think when you look at how legal teams are assembled, if you look at our research, that career progression report in 2012, you saw a really stark difference in the experiences of diverse and socially mobile talent, and in fact, all talent between law firms. So the best place to work was in-house. The second best place to work was government legal. And the next best place was law firms. So particularly diverse and socially mobile talent had very difficult experiences in law firms in 2012. And in fact, they were all very negative about their experiences. And if you then looked at kind of straight white elite educated men at that time, they were fine in law firms. So you think about then who's leaving law firms and going in-house and building these teams. It's people who have left law because they have been unhappy or because they felt like they weren't treated fairly very often. People might leave just for the change of pace and for better work-life balance. That's part of that happiness and culture. But so people aren't going to want to leave a place that they didn't really like and then recreate that. So I think there is also this impetus and driver, and also the people you're recruiting are coming from law firms because they want something different. So I think and often the pay is less. So another important lesson around people being first, that if you want to attract and retain talent in-house, there's more to it than money, right? We see these crazy headlines with law firms throwing more and more money at these first-year associates. And it's like, if people don't want to work where you are and they don't like the job, just throwing money at them, there's not enough money in the world for people to be unhappy. And I think particularly with, millennials, and now really it's is it Gen Y, Gen Z? Yeah. They work-life balance. They value their personal life. Their values are different. It's not how much money as possible. It's, I need to enjoy the path, right? And that's, I think, what a lot of people don't realize. It's not about giving up everything now for some goal in the future in 8 years of partnership. You need to enjoy the journey, and you should be enjoying every day of your life and constructing a life that you like. I think getting that work-life balance is important. Getting that, experience is different. So in-house, we have a different set of pressures because we have to keep people happy. We can't do the money, but there's things we can do. We can ensure that they have a more inclusive working environment, that they're treated with respect. There's more of a balance. And that's, a big part of what that looks like. I think part two of that equation is around in-house versus private practice. Is in private practice, I think you become a partner because you're really good in your specialty. You become more specialized. You become very good at that. I think a missing piece of that puzzle sometimes are the people and the management skills. So you rise in a law firm because you're technically very good and you're able to execute. It's not always the people factor. I think some firms are much better at this now than others. But if I had to kind of generalize, I would say that's an issue where you go in-house and you realize that in a leadership role, you have a much wider range of things that you're working on all the time. And part of that are people issues. So you're dealing with your own employees, managing your team, getting the best out of them, managing relationships with your clients internally. And then also you spend a lot of time managing relationships with your law firm. So your panel firm relationships are very important. So it's a lot about people and relationships, and it's a much planner. And I think at a law firm, you kind of go like this, where in-house, you kind of go like that. So when you start in-house, you might start in quite a specialized role, but if you want to go up, you better be able to broaden out. So it's very interesting. So I have to advise people, yes, you're a specialist in this product area, but if you want a long-term career in-house, you need to expand out that role. You're not going to like the king of derivative. Your role is in sales and trading, so you want to broaden that experience out. So it's different between the two. And I think that's why kind of the axiom among recruiters is that many partners are not suitable for kind of a general counsel or a senior role in-house. Because I think the ability to juggle lots of different things, not spend all your time on one project, be used to that and be used to that kind of fast pace and the ability to shift and change between things.
I agree.
I think been quite difficult for law firm partners. So I actually think that wasn't true for me, because the way I had constructed my role within firms, I was kind of working the way an in-house lawyer would work, because I was doing lots of different things and I was, always busy. I didn't have the kind of ups and downs that transactional lawyers had, because when I had a down period in my billable work, I just upped my non-billable work, supporting diversity inclusion program, my firms, and doing my work with the Interlaw Diversity Forum.
Yeah. But it's interesting you say that, because I'm not going to lie, it's probably one of when a law firm partner gets in touch with us to make a move in-house, I'm interested in moving in-house, like the lack of awareness that again, I'm generally speaking, but I feel there's a bit of arrogance that I can do. I'm a law firm partner, so I can definitely do the job of being a general counsel or being an in-house lawyer. And an underappreciation, I think, for the different skill set that's required, and that breadth of knowledge and people skills.
Well, it's best illustrated by the fact that I had spinal surgery, and I had ruptured discs in my back, and the doctor told me that he didn't want me to go into the office for a certain amount of time. And the law firm partner one of the law firm partners I was working with said that the doctor's advice was BS and that I just was lazy and didn't want to work. So I do think that probably perfectly illustrates, because not only do they think they can do anything within the law, they think they know more than spinal surgeons. So ultimately there's a cultural and attitude among lawyers. We're the best, we're the brightest, we know everything. And that's sort of, I think, is that on my list? Should I put it on my list? So I don't have it on my list, but I'm going to add a lesson 1.B or
be a lawyer.
My lesson. The most important thing is know what you know, and even more importantly, know what you don't know. Everyone has to know their limitations. And I think that is going to be your downfall as a law firm partner. If you're playing that I know everything game and you go in-house and you try and play that game, that is going to crash and burn very quickly. No one is paying you to know everything. People are paying you to find out the answer and find solutions. So I like to think no matter where you are in your legal career, that lesson of know what you know and know what you don't know, there's nothing wrong with saying, that's a great question. I remember sitting in meetings, sweating bullets, terrified someone's going to ask me a question I didn't know the answer to.
Yeah.
What a crazy waste of energy and time, because all you have to do is say, that's a great question. Let me take that away and find that out. Very rarely are you getting a pop quiz. People just need answers. No one's going to die on an operating table if you don't get an answer within the next hour. You've always got time to take something. Now, some queries are more urgent than others. So maybe you also want to say, and when do you need that back by? And when, and the third lesson is, and what form do you want that answer in? Because number one, it's a client asking a question, me being told to go research it and write a memo. So I stayed up all night writing a memo, and then I was told to write a cover note to the memo, and then I was told to write a cover email to the cover note to the memo. It's a client at like 4 a.m. I'm back in the office at 9:30. We called the client, and the client said, "Why did you send me this? I'm not paying for it. I didn't ask you for a memo, a cover note to the memo, or an email. All I wanted was a yes or no answer. You sent me for this," and I was kept up on, right? So it actually encapsulates all of that, which is, find out, you can always go back and answer the question, find out when the deadline is, and find out in what form. And, very often people don't want memos anymore. People used to always want memos as backup. Very often, because everyone's cost conscious, it's just give me an answer.
Give an answer, yeah. And show that you could show your workings if you were asked to do it. And I think I think your point on being put on the spot and expected to know the answer to everything is part of legal training. Is the way at university and college, it's recall. A lot of the way you're particularly in Scotland anyway. I don't know if it applies elsewhere, but your critical thinking is one thing, but actually there's a lot of recall to it. And I think for future proofing yourself as a lawyer, like with the advancements in technology and AI, and there is absolutely no reason to know everything. Like the ability to recall facts is something that I just think is a skill that is not necessary in the way that it has been in years gone by. So I think it's sage advice. On the partnership model that you spoke about, like it being an odd model, I can't recall the word you used, but being a unique model, I guess. How much from a diversity and inclusion perspective, like how big of a factor is that in holding law firms back in the structure of how things are structured, and that pyramid structure, and people having that 15 years of subject matter expertise, is that something you see as being an impact or a hindrance in
it's
advancement?
Yeah, it's a huge problem, because even in corporations where there's a clear chain of command and control, middle layer above upper management are often where the problem lies. So there's a lot of research that talks about, Fiona Wolf calls it the permafrost layer, but that kind of like layer just below upper management. And, we see the law, like in our last career progression report in 2021, we saw a lot of people saying that they didn't feel like their law firms lived up to the statements they made around diversity and inclusion. And I think big barrier to that, so if you already have that problem, even in a corporation where there's a clear chain of command, the problem you have at law firms are you have this delegated power to managers, but that power has been given to them by the rank and file partners. Well, the rank and file partners, are the next level down, really have a lot of freedom and flexibility you don't have in a corporation. What is a manager going to do if they say everyone go do this and half of them just don't? And two of them, put two fingers in the air, right? So you've got a real issue with how do you do cultural change, and how do you change things when it's very difficult to get people to change how they work and what they do. So that partnership structure is difficult because it's nebulous, because it's like, who's your boss really? Well, in many ways, they would say, well, I'm the boss, I own this business. And so there's this tension between you've delegated your authority and you've got management, but how much power does that management really have? They serve at the behest of the partnership. So if you make popular decisions, it's like a representative democracy, right? It's like with our politicians, if you think in the States, what do they live in terror of? They live in terror of their constituents throwing them out. So the minute they finish one election cycle, they're already looking forward to the next. So every decision they make is through the prism of, what does this mean to my constituents? I'm here to serve them, which is part of the job. But on the other hand, there's also a fear that if you anger or upset them, you will not be there the next round, and people want to keep jobs. So that's the issue, is the structure itself makes it hard to manage people. And, it's probably overused expression, but it's like herding cats with a squirt gun. It's just really difficult to get partners to go in the directions you want. And so you often hear in law firms all the right messages coming from the top, all these golden policies that are in place. But I think that law firms let us down in how they implement those policies and enforce them, from everything from, maternity policies through to, bullying, harassment, and grievances. Sometimes those policies are honored in their breach. And again, what are you going to do about it? So it's a very difficult structure to get that cultural change and really people. And so you really have to do training. We've said this since 2012. Leadership training is critically important. Getting people to be better leaders, better people managers, realize these tools are available, these policies are there. If you use them, you're actually going to get better outcomes.
We'll move on to lesson 2.
So I think, this is something that took me a long time to figure out. And it's something I really figured out when I started the Forum for U.S. Securities Lawyers. The reason I started it is I sat at Weill Gotshal, and I was working with a partner called Wayne Raposo, and we were working on something novel or working on something that was changing in the market. He would pick up the phone and we would call Sarah Murphy at Freshfields and say, hey, what are you seeing, Sarah, in the market? And I went, weird. Why are we calling our competitors to talk about issues? Because again, you realize as a U.S. securities lawyer, we are spread out all over the market. No one firm sets market practice. No one firm knows everything. And that's change. The market practice changes. So if you don't understand market practice, the rule itself doesn't tell you how the rule is implemented. So any solution you have from a legal perspective has to be understanding the law and not always understanding what's behind it. because often there can be gray issues on the face of it. But if you understand the reason for the law, that can help you understand what you're doing. That's part.
Okay.
Part two is understanding the commercial awareness, having commercial awareness. So
Yeah.
one of the rules that we had back then that we were looking at is for U.S. companies, the law said that you had to put a legend on the back of the share certificate. Well, back when there were paper share certificate, that was fine, except, well, Europe now has all dematerialized. There are no share certificates. And they're illegal for tax reasons as well, because people don't want people sitting with boxes of share certificates under their bed that the tax man know about, right? So, or saying you have to put a physical legend. People were giving advice that you had to put a physical legend on the back of that security. Well, what that meant was it was inadmissible to trading in the electronic settlement system. And it also was a problem for trading because there was no way to mark in the electronic trading system that the security was restricted in some way. So while that made sense from the face of the rule, you had no commercial awareness when you gave that advice because it doesn't work within our system. And there's actually guidance out there for what to do with electronic securities. So someone could have adapted that rule and realized just because it says that on the face, it's just an old rule. And in fact, the electronic guidance says this applies to all legends. So if you knew about that, that you could do that. So it showed that, so the advice was good advice and that it followed the law, but it was bad advice because it didn't work within the actual mechanics of how securities are traded and settled. And it created all kinds of issues for banks as well, because if there's one share and one person owns it, there can be a whole chain. So suddenly you've got this chain of ownership. So you have to really understand, you have to understand the rule itself and why it's there. You have to understand the commercial context in which it exists. So there could be three solutions to a problem, but for your particular business, only one of them might work because you have to understand the business and how the business functions. So that's the third part. And then the last part is you need to also understand risk, right? So you have to say, okay, what is the risk? And sometimes when you're giving advice to a client, you don't say, this is the only way to do it because it's riskless. Sometimes you have to give clients options because it's up to them if they want to take a risk, right? It's not for you to make that decision. So you might go to clients and say, here's the riskless option. Almost always the riskless option is not commercial and doesn't work. But here's like kind of the next one, and here's the next one, and understand that risk profile. And you put all that together kind of in a blender to give out legal advice. And I think lawyers are bad. It's because they're only doing the first part and they're not doing the second two. So you have to really and I think that's where in-house lawyers are different, because you're embedded in your business. You learn more about but really good private practice lawyers learn about their clients and they ask about their clients, and they're able to put themselves in the shoes of their client to give that practical advice. And I think that's what kind of made me stand out as a U.S. securities lawyer, was my ability to have that commercial perspective, understand my clients, and also have that risk understanding where you can say, look, there's some risk to this, but if you look at enforcement actions in the past 3 years, there's been one in this space. So, I'm not telling you should do this, but I'm telling you if you do, the likelihood of an issue is low. So it is complicated. It is not easy, but if that becomes kind of part of what you do, it just becomes natural to you. But at the beginning, that can seem quite difficult because, as you said, in law school, especially if you go to kind of a black letter school where it's a lot of memorization, know the rules, cite the rules, that's exactly the opposite. So you see that a lot actually on the continent, because that's what continental law schools look like. It's very much like in France, like, what's the code? Tell us the code, recite the code back. Well, none of that has any elements of commercial awareness or risk, right? So it's something that you need to learn to become better. And that is another difference, I think, between in-house lawyers and private practice lawyers that can that private practice lawyers from switching to in-house. Yeah.
That's the point on love that piece on phoning your competitor or someone that would be a competitor at Freshfields. I guess no one can work with every client. No one can work with everyone. So having that combined knowledge sharing or being receptive to giving someone a nudge in the right direction is key. And how does that underpin? Because the inclusive hiring toolkit is obviously an open sourced tool, right? Tell us more about that. And I think that's like learning from competition and utilizing like what do our competitors do well in this space? How can we improve? Love to hear more about that hiring toolkit just as a recruiter.
Well, I think it was interesting because, again, rather than thinking of other law firms as your competitors, you're all legal colleagues. And, I think particularly in capital markets, you're all there to work together. So even, on a deal, you've got the client who's the issuer, and then you've got a bank advising them. They each have a set of lawyers. So even though you're at the table from each other, your interests are aligned for 90% of the deal. You all just want to get the deal done. And then there's a few commercial points and elements that are, they're not contentious, but they need to be negotiated. But so I think thinking of those people as your colleagues more, and as you said, none of us can see everything. So it's actually problematic too for the market. It's in my interest to make sure that if you're at a competing law firm, you don't issue a crazy opinion that then infects the market and everyone's like, oh, well, we just got this opinion from Scott, Area Brown, why won't you give us this opinion? And it's like, well, that's why, so you want to make sure it's in everyone's interest to make sure that the market moves together, that there's checks and balances. So there's areas where we compete. And I think making sure in an evolving area of law or an area that's unclear to have us all work together to come up with a consensus. That's why I started the forum, because I thought, well, these people informally do this. I'm not I'm not close to Sarah Murphy. I can't pick up the phone and call Sarah and say, she's now retired, but back in the day, I didn't have a relationship with her. So I sort of got the next generation down together through the forum. And the ethos was, let's make all this open source. Let's be open, let's be transparent. Let's all help and support each other. We put out a lot of resources within the forum as well. We put out resources on complex issues and put guidance notes out to tell people how to do things. As I said, it then supports and helps everyone. So that ethos is within Interlaw, is that we're bringing people together. All our events are free and open to everyone. All our publications are free and open to everyone. Our goal as an organization, we're structured, as a company limited by guarantee, which means no profits can be distributed up to me, the only shareholder. All my time is volunteer. So we structure ourselves as a not-for-profit. We benchmark what people make off of the not-for-profit sector. So people can work with us, do work for a lower rate, because we all share the ethos and the benefit that we're trying to help everyone within the legal sector. So if people ask me to come and speak, I speak. Very rare that I say no to anything, because I feel like it's a privilege to get to help people and support people. So if you look at the Inclusive Recruitment Toolkit, we know that recruitment is an area that's challenging, right? And we started the project because I've worked with recruiters. I've also worked with my internal recruiters both at law firms and at Jefferies. And I know that this is a challenging area. So we started a set of roundtable to meet with both in-house and external recruiters and say, where are your obstacles? Because I think also unfairly, external recruiters are often blamed for issues around diversity. And it was really interesting what came out of those roundtables, because you saw sort of a chain where you saw that the recruiters who were in-house at companies, law firms, felt like they were restricted by their internal clients. Turn external recruiters felt restricted by what the recruiters who were in-house were telling them, but those in-house recruiters were actually being fettered by their clients. And then those people are the people that complain there's not enough diversity. So having to educate people on where the issues are, where the problems are, and how things can be done differently, because this is also the issue with law firms being really, really traditional. Many law firms still recruit, not even from the whole Russell group, which is 40 plus universities, they still recruit from 12. So I think rethinking how we recruit was really important. So we took those learnings together and we worked with a range of recruiters, both in-house and external. And we brought together every piece of information we could. We linked in the electronic version of it. It's all available for free on our website, interlawdiversityforum.org, on the publications tab. We went through every step we could go through. It's also a useful tool for people who are looking for jobs, because we've got links to sample interview questions that are outcomes based. There's a lot of interesting things in there, I think, for people to educate themselves. We also talk about accessibility for lawyers with disabilities or talent with disabilities. So useful information in there if you are listening and that's an area that's helpful for you. We talk about what kinds of things you can ask for during the process and what makes the process more inclusive. And I think, making that free and available to everyone is hugely important. And we go through every single stage of the recruitment process. I think it's like 26 pages long.
It's great.
Long. It's a lot. And that's part of, if we're saying to the sector, get better and do better, I think you need to constantly be giving people the tools to do that. And again, it's like at any one firm, there's a limit to how much resource, how much money and time they have available to do this work. We're all better when we come together to do work like that then everyone can benefit from, and we don't need to reinvent the wheel. So definitely look for opportunities where we can add something that other people haven't done. We always try and not replicate what's already being done. Others would like to replicate what we're already doing. But that's the purest form of flattery, and these things normally disappear under it's work it takes to do this work and sustain.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great, an amazing document and toolkit. So we'll share the link and as other resources at Interlaw as well. But with that toolkit, like, who do you see it being the most value add to? Like, and how do you see? I guess from a recruitment, which you've probably heard this time and time again from pulling it together and working in the forum over those years, but it is that hiring manager piece where the policies exist, but when the need's there and the burning needs to hire, it's down the pecking order for me. It's not at the forefront of hiring, and there is an element of tokenism on a short list that sometimes feels that it drifts towards that rather than being signposted that this is a priority, because when it's your job and there's going to be more work for me if someone comes in who's not right, or it takes longer to hire, then those objectives, I think it gets a little bit lost at hiring manager level. How can those people best utilize it and apply it?
Well, look, I think, that there's kind of two, I think, big problems with this process, and that is a barrier. I think one is, what we think good is, right? So when you're looking at candidates, who's good, as I sort of alluded to earlier, I think that system is broken. I can tell you someone with a 2.2 from Oxbridge is not good. I mean, if you're in a system where you're probably privileged to get to those universities, right? Yeah. So you've gone to a public school where you've been catered to. You're now at a top university where you're being catered to, and you still can't do well. So I think challenging people on what good is, for example, if you're hiring a CFO and you say, I only want someone who's been a CFO before, you've already said, I'm only going to hire men, right? There are no women CFOs. If you brought in that rollout and said, well, we're also going to consider women who've been partners at Big Four accounting firms, boom, the world opens up, right? So it's, I think, putting a little bit of interrogation with your clients on what good looks like. Because again, if you're looking for someone in a role and you say, I only want magic circle, that's going to start limiting who you can recruit. So if you're able to open that up a little bit, and I'm not saying you can do this in every role. So I think that and certainly we're not saying you should be building diverse shortlists at the expense of quality. So I think you have to interrogate a little bit what good looks like. And that's where I think you can then push to get a little bit of a wider berth who can go on your list. And that we've heard is really challenging and really difficult. We heard from internal and external recruiters that having the conversation with clients about expanding out the pool or recommending talent that wasn't quote unquote typical was incredibly difficult. And I agree with you. It's like, people used to say this, and I don't know if this is too antiquated an expression to use anymore, but like, you don't get fired for hiring IBM, right? You go get that brand, and maybe now it's like, I don't know. I can't. Well, so, the point is you hire the number one leader in the system. So I guess, like, you don't get fired for hiring Google for a tech problem. Like, if you hire that brand, then at least if it doesn't work out, you can say, but look, I hired someone from Oxbridge. How was I to know they weren't going to work out? And by the way, there's amazing people there, but all I'm saying is I would still stick to my grade requirement, because you're making a value judgment when you're saying, I'll take a 2.2 from Oxbridge, but I'm not even going to go to these other universities and talk to people with the first. And in America, we definitely tier. So I think one point is about, and those are called proxies for merit. So one thing is interrogate and research. So Dr. Lisa Webley, my research partner who recently stepped down as president of Birmingham School of Law and teaches there, probably the number one researcher in the UK on diversity and law. You have to interrogate what those are. And I also think, again, you have to kind of dispel people the belief that they have to truly then believe in the process that you're getting to the best people for the role. And I think also there's an education process that goes into, I think, even just getting people to understand what's in that toolkit. So for example, next year, we're going to do a 2-hour seminar walking people through the toolkit. And I also have encouraged people to do sessions with their clients. So if you're an external recruiter, why not do a session and walk people through those issues? Because I don't think people have thought of 90% of that stuff. People wave a hand and be like, get me candidates. And, standing, you've got to keep the list open for longer. Like someone recently I know was applying for a CEO role. The person departing the role isn't departing until May or June. The job advertised, and they closed applications at the end of October.
Yeah, that's crazy. Huh?
And so some, sent in an application now and they said, oh, I'm sorry, we're really advanced in the process already for a you're hiring someone for it in like 6 months. So doing stuff like that narrows your runway, narrows your timetable. So it's encouraging people to expand out the timetable. We know that diverse and social mobile talent are often, it's harder to get them to the table. When you're risk averse, you're less willing to take risks. So take you double the number of conversations to get a woman to come to the table for a job than a man. So when you shorten those timetable and you shorten those runways, you're very unlikely to be getting diverse talent coming into the mix.
Yeah.
And I think, thinking as well, how you recruit, do you want to push those ads out in a different way? We have a jobs board at Interlaw, so people advertise roles with us. We directed email out to over 9,000 people within our network and across, 800 plus organizations. So it's a great way to get people in. But, just think about how are you advertising the role? Where are you going? And how are you sourcing it?
Yeah. All good. All very good advice. Great. Well, we'll move on to lesson 3. You'd share that.
Lesson 3, kind of in the vein of things I wish I knew when I started, is that every problem has a solution. So I think often we get vexed, we get stressed, we get upset. It's sort of related to what you don't know, knowing what you don't know and learning to take problems away. You also have to learn that there's a solution to almost every problem. You just have to find it, and it may take time. Is also where we're all stronger together. But I think giving yourself that possibility to say, yes, there is a solution to this, even if it seems hard or difficult, you're going to be able to figure it out. And I think sometimes we have these limiting beliefs where we think this is impossible. I can't do this. I'm not going to have it. I'm not going to be able to do this. You can find a way to do almost anything. I mean, very rarely have I had to tell a client no. Sometimes I tell a client, you can't do it the way you want to, but if you're here, it's asking the client where they want to go, and then you can figure out a way to get there. So sometimes you can say, can I drive a truck down a one-way street the wrong direction? The answer is no. But what is your goal? Well, my goal is to get the truck over there. And it's like, well, here on the map, here's another way you can get there. That involves progress, right? So sometimes it's stepping back and saying, well, you can't do that thing you just told me you want to do, but what's your objective? Let me help you get to your objective, right? So there is a solution to every problem. You can figure it out.
Nice.
It's a great thing to know. It's very comforting.
Yeah, absolutely. It's good to have that resilience, and it's great with hindsight. And with applying that to your story and your journey arriving in London, did you think, there's a solution to having a more progressive environment in this city or within this profession in this city? Did you think there was going to be, in that period of time that you've been here, 17 years of Interlaw, was that a mindset you took into that?
Well, in the beginning, I didn't have time to think about anything because I was working so many hours. I had like one day off a week and I just spent it in bed. I was so tired. It was, very challenging. So I really just kept my head down and worked, and it was really hard. And I think things were so difficult and they were harder for me than other people. I mean, obviously no one had a cakewalk at kind of a US firm in London doing private equity backed work. We were crazy hours, clients were crazy hours, and that was the culture. But I did see hope within Interlaw. I mean, when I went into the Judicial Appointments Commission in 2010 and first met with them, they monitored all protected characteristics except for sexual orientation and gender identity. I went in and met with them, and they said, oh, sure, we'll give you, they were doing that research report on sex and on gender. And I said, sure, and they said, sure, we'll give you our survey. You can do an LGBT plus report. But just to be clear, in our lifetimes, the judges never authorize us monitoring sex orientation or gender identity in our lifetimes.
All right.
Okay, I'll take that challenge. In 2011, when we published our report, they changed leadership at the Judicial Appointments Commission. That person wrote the intro to our report and announced at our report launch at the Law Society that they would start monitoring sexual orientation from that day forward. Look, people, again, it's that limiting belief. If someone wants to tell you you can't do it, I think I don't hear or know very well. And I also think that everything kind of is possible, but it does take hard work, as it takes data. I think that's the reason why things don't progress now, is we're in this period where everyone's become polarized. Everyone thinks they're right and therefore virtuous. Everyone shouts at everyone. Nobody listens, and nobody can respectfully disagree with people. I find that when I have a disagreement with a lot of my friends, I take a deep breath and think, is this going to be the end of our friendship? I have friends who disagree with me on something, and then they just walk away from the friendship. Like a real friendship and a real relationship, you can have differing beliefs and you can have mutual respect and move forward. You know, Justice Scalia and Ruth Bader Ginsburg had tea every week. I mean, there's people could not have been more diametrically opposed beliefs in their values, in how they worked, in how they approached law and wrote opinions. These people are polar opposites. However, they found the time and the space. And I think that was Justice Ginsburg's way of being better and also engaging and learning. Because you know what? If you don't meet with Scalia every week, you have no ability to change him or influence him.
Yeah, exactly.
Good leadership is about respecting difference. And if you think people are in the wrong place, it's about meeting them where they're at and winning over their hearts and minds and bringing them to you. And that's what we've lost now. And that's why we're losing progress in civil rights. You know, people blame the right, but I think you have to blame yourself as well and look in the mirror and make progress. You have to do the hard work, and people don't want to do the hard work. They want to put on social media, say something that their 500,000 followers already agree with, get 1,000 likes and feel smug, but they're really chasing celebrity. They're not chasing activism or change. So, and people mistake that for activism, and people mistake that for change. And we're seeing those outcomes, right? And you live in a bubble where you convince yourself that you're in this reality that isn't actually reality. So also by not engaging people with different ideas or different views, you actually have a really limited and narrow view of what the world actually is.
Yeah, no, it's a great perspective. And yeah, really well put in terms of the echo chambers that you find yourself in sometimes. So, yeah, I think I having spoken to you over the years and the different landmarks and the change in those 17 years, is moving the needle forward each year. I think is a really healthy outcome each year for the progress that's making. The end goal is obviously utopia within the profession, and probably seems like there's miles to go, but it's making those steps. So yeah, keep doing the great stuff at Interlaw. It's great to observe and take part in the little part that we do. I've been asking guests there for one podcast recommendation. What would you recommend? What do you if you're a listener of podcasts?
So I'm going to give you, I think, 3 podcasts. So the first one that I love listening to every week, and this might not be everyone's cup of tea, but I love listening to The Rest is Politics US.
Oh, yeah.
I'm not on the UK version. I've never listened to it. I've never seen it, but I love the US one. It's fascinating. It's
the Mooch.
Anthony Scaramucci, who was famously in Trump's cabinet, I think for 11 days he lasted until Trump fired him for challenging him. And he's a registered Republican, but he did work on the Harris campaign. So he's a very interesting figure, but he's got a lot of insights into Trump and how Trump thinks and how Trump works, which is fascinating. And then there's a woman named Patty Kay, who is a she's originally British, but she kind of traded places with me, I think. She's been in America for 20 plus years and has raised her family there and lives in DC. And they're also credibly connected on the inside of politics. So they know people in the administration and the campaign. They get a lot of inside information and intel. So I find it fascinating because, again, if you understand what's happening in the world, you can step back and live in your echo chamber, or you can kind of listen to podcasts like this that will interviews and will give you inside information. And I just find it fascinating to watch from the outside. The other one I've really been enjoying is there's a podcast. This is quite niche and specific, but there's a podcast called Blow Up, and it's inside Bazaar magazine. So in the 1990s, a woman named Liz Tilberis took over as editor-in-chief of Bazaar, which is the long-running fashion magazine. She was Anna Wintour's kind of second in command at Vogue, and she took it over and really turned it into this incredible piece of art. She worked with the top photographers. She worked with Baron & Baron advertising with Fabian Baron. Every issue was graphic designed, and they were really beautiful. It would come every month, and it was just this beautiful thing to look at. And she also, so she's the one who famously kind of reinvented Princess Diana, put her in Versace in the revenge dress, completely rebranded her in the wake of that divorce from Prince Charles. Also, there was a lot of, she started writing real social commentary and had feminists write columns. So reinvented the whole game. And it's a whole podcast about that period, interviewing everyone from behind the scenes to the photographers to the models. Launched a lot of those big supermodels that we still are looking at and seeing today. It's a super podcast. Again, niche. And my last one that I think is really cool is Revisionist History by Malcolm Gladwell. He wrote The Tipping Point. It's really fascinating. And again, what I love about it is it's filled with information. It's filled with a lot of data and statistics, and it really challenges your views of the world. And you might not agree with everything that's in it, but it's always going to kind of spark thought and broaden your horizons a little bit.
Cool. How far back does that look? So it's history focused, yeah? Is it?
So, well, there's some new episodes that are about, he's written a sequel to The Tipping Point called Revenge of the Tipping Point from 25 years ago. So it's a really wide range of stuff. So it's not a specific period. It just jumps around and talks about and it's 8 seasons of it. So there's a lot of them.
Oh, nice.
It's less niche and more deep, and there's lots there.
Yeah, I'll check those out and share them as well. But thank you so much.
Sure, listen to yours.
I'd say, oh yeah, of course. I mean, that's a given when I ask that question. We have to score that out every time we ask that question. We have to edit that out, obviously. So yeah. Well, thank you so much for taking the time and sharing that with us. And if someone listening wants to get involved with the Interlaw Diversity Forum, how would they go about doing that, and how can they best interact?
Yep. If you go to interlawdiversityforum.org, if you go to the bottom, you can sign up to our mailing list. As I said, all events are free and open to everyone. We just finished doing the 2025 schedule over the weekend. So we've got about 25 to 30 events planned already, and then there'll be more added in during the course of the year. So those will be up on the website. And there's an upcoming events button, and you can look through all the events that are scheduled, sign up for them. And if you're interested in looking at our publications, those are on our research, the toolkit. There's also a data collection guide that's up there. Yeah. And if you're in-house counsel or a law firm and interested in DEI data collection, contact us about the UK Model Diversity Survey. We have replicated what the American Bar Association's been doing for about 8 years. We signed an agreement with them, so we've replicated their system. So law firms clients sign up as signatories, and then we push the survey out to their key law firms. We're at about 40 plus clients, and we have 38 law firms participating. So it's a great program. It goes beyond just data collection. These guides we've been publishing are part of that program, because we're going to ask people to get better at data. A, we're helping them collect better data, and B, then we're helping on recruitment. So we're coming with materials to help support people moving forward and making progress on that data. So that's great. So reach out. You can also join me on LinkedIn. Feel free to send me a message there as well.
Yeah.
Awesome. No, you're very receptive and paying it forward, and the information you share on there is great. So I highly recommend following. And yeah, I've been to some of the events, as well as guys in our team. So they're fantastic. So I highly encourage people to get on the radar, and if it's not something you've read about or looked into, then it's a great opportunity to do that and be part of the discussion. So but thank you very much for joining me. Really enjoyed that, and yeah, all the best for the year ahead.
Thanks so much for asking me here, Scott. Have a great rest of the year and a good holiday season. Happy New Year.
You too. Happy New Year.
Thank you, sir.
Hi, thanks for listening to today's show of Lessons I Learned in Law, the podcast powered by Harriet Brown. I really hope you got some value from it. It's the real reason that I set up the podcast, to help you, our audience of in-house lawyers or people within the legal profession, to learn from others in the industry. At Harriet Brown, we're a legal recruitment business that is driven by a mission to help lawyers find fulfillment in their careers. For us, this extends well beyond the transactional aspect of helping you find a new job or finding hires for your legal team. Where we excel is bringing the best people together and the right people together, which is why community has always been at the heart of our business. We really try to add real value to our network. So to keep up to date with everything going on in our community, make sure you subscribe to Lessons I Learned in Law on your favourite podcast platform. And if you've enjoyed this episode, leave us a review or share it with your friends and colleagues on social media. That would be much appreciated. Take care.